I'm Ronnie Kasrils. I'm from South Africa. I was involved in the struggle all my adult life against apartheid. Member of the military wing of the ANC. I'm Mkhonto weSizwe, Communist Party, ANC member, and I became a minister from the time that Mandela formed our first democratic election, minister from 1994 through to 2008. I continue to be active in my old age. Come to the northern counties. I've met the mayor of Belfast, a wonderful woman, as everybody is, who's been part of the struggle for freedom and justice and equality and international solidarity. And we've taken a little bit of a tour of Belfast. I've done it before, seen some new things today, of course, these wonderful murals and the way they change, the marvellous message that they get across about the need to struggle for justice and equality and internationalism. And of course, this very poignant visit to the graveyard here of those who have died in the struggle to make Ireland free. And I can assure you of the closeness, like lips and teeth, of the South African struggle, of the Irish struggle, a two-way process, how we've inspired each other. As a youngster, I was greatly inspired in my reading of the Irish struggle, and it's great to be back. And I want to see this flag flying formally over the entire island of Ireland.
Ronnie Kasrils, you're very welcome. It's tremendous to have you back in Ireland, particularly today, Mandela Day. It's a pleasure to have this opportunity to speak with you in Culturland, where you're going to be launching this evening your new book, A Simple Man.
Thank you very much. I'm delighted to be here.
Ronnie, how did you become a revolutionary political activist and find your way into the ranks of the ANC and Mkhonto weSizwe?
Well, it's childhood. I'm a bit of a rebel at heart. I was a little bit unconventional in the sense of a white South African, of hating to see injustice done to the black people who worked for us. And we could see it in the streets and in family homes. And it was always appalling, and I absolutely, as a young kid, was revolted by it. Going through school, crossing the colour line, which was illegal, to have black friends, discussions with them, but bohemian stuff, writing poetry, etc. Sharpeville massacre, 69 people shot in the back, fleeing from the police, over 240 dreadfully injured. And I was working in a film studio and heard this news, and I just felt, my God, I can't feel satisfied because I don't observe apartheid and I've got black friends. One has to act to change the world. And that came without reading too much. I had really begun to read stories and the novels of Ireland and Spain and so on. So I suppose that had got through to me. And I took the decision. I looked for the Communist Party and the ANC. I was fortunate. Through connections, I was able to make the link. And I was in at the deep end because most people were rounded up and in prison. There were few on the run. I was a face unknown to the security police, and I was helping people who was on the run, like later would happen to me, and got in at the deep end very quickly. After that state of emergency caused by Sharpeville, the banning of the ANC, Communist Party long banned, I became involved publicly, and within a year or so, was a public speaker and involved at that stage still in non-violent demonstrations and protests, very active ones. But by 1961, the middle of that year, I'm approached to join Mkhonto weSizwe, Spear of the Nation, rather like the Irish, aren't we, in terms of that classical historic tradition, because that Spear of the Nation goes back to the wars of resistance against the dispossession by the Dutch in the first place, but then particularly the old enemy, the Brits. And it didn't take me long. I knew in my mind that there was no other possibility of making change in South Africa other than the use of force, of arms. And I said yes right away and became very involved. So within no time, I was commander of the provincial MK, Mkhonto Wesizwe, of the province of Natal, and very involved in the sabotage campaign actions of that time.
What, in your view, were the most important influences on the political direction of the ANC and the armed struggle of Mkhonto Wesizwe?
Well, to start with, the question of moving from non-violence, well, very active mass struggle and resistance, defiance of laws and the like, to take a decision to engage the enemy through force of arms required tremendous debate and clear thinking. And it was a political decision with political objectives and a very clear-cut strategy. Wouldn't say so clear-cut to start with, because these things do sharpen up during the struggle, but very clear-cut political objectives to engage the enemy and to use sabotage action later into low-level guerrilla struggle. IRA were more successful than us. I mean, they fought against the Brits. We had a tough struggle, and it did develop into a sort of urban, rural, low-key guerrilla struggle. But what was key was that politics was primary, that we didn't take up the weapon for the sake of violence, that we wouldn't romanticize that. That's difficult, and we did in fact, but under political leadership and guidance. And those who were involved in the armed struggle had to be very politically clear, extremely disciplined, accept the leadership of the ANC, the political leadership, and have that long-term vision that we were fighting not to destroy a people. It wasn't race, it wasn't a color, it was a system, the apartheid racist system, colonial system that had morphed into this extreme form of apartheid. And that's what we were going to destroy for the sake of all the people of South Africa to come together in terms of a prescription the ANC and its allies had already come to and formulated in 1955, which was the Freedom Charter, which was this wonderful document of national liberation, of independence, of freedom, of embracing all who lived within South Africa. And although in a number of clauses, very simply written and very clear, both socio-economic rights issues, etc., and of course universal franchise, equality of the vote, that was something we were committed to, and we would not spare ourselves in order to serve the people through that process. And that was kept to the fore and in the minds of the combatants, of our people, of all people within the struggle itself, but the masses generally. And the armed actions reinforced that whole political objective for the people to see that, but for those bearing arms as well.
What are the most significant challenges facing South Africa today?
The process of 23 years into our liberation has reached a very crucial stage. We're moving towards real economic emancipation in a world in which monopoly capital and multinational corporations dominate, and the question of inequality in terms of it's less than 1% owning more than 50-60% of the world's wealth, etc. To begin to achieve that, you have a lot of political and social tensions, and in a national struggle where you have different classes, even if, as in our case, they were in nascent formation amongst black people. A few of black elites had made capital, had made their wealth under apartheid as stooges, as the Bantustan process. But once there was the whole question of universal franchise coming to power, having a ruling power, the ANC, and then facing the particular problems of transforming a state, but of focusing everything on the people and upliftment of the people, the Mandela legacy, you get people who simply say it's our turn to eat, who look more to themselves, their own selfish needs, and you get into that particular area which all societies at this time present throughout the world begin to face, of enrichment of a few, of corruption, which is seeping through institutions, through a ruling party, opportunism that emerges, and the struggle within the ANC. Some people saying the rot set in and it's not going to get out of that. Others saying we've got to struggle to make the ANC keep it committed and on that political strategic path set by the Freedom Charter, not just Mandela. So there's a big struggle that takes place in all such situations within national movements, and you need for that very disciplined, committed, clear-cut, clear-headed people who recognize what the current challenges are and what they'll be in the future, and are there not to serve themselves but the people. It's easier said than done, Declan, but it's a reality of life, and it's actually the material, cultural, socio-economic reality of the planet today being ruled by the American empire and London and Paris and so on, where the whole question of the control of wealth and resources is for an elite and not for the people. So it's a common struggle against this. We're facing that in South Africa, and when I travel around, whether it's the Palestinian Authority or whether it's the Jeremy Corbyn issue for Labour in Britain, or indeed in Ireland, in the island of Ireland, the wonderful work of Sinn Féin, what you're having to deal with in terms of corruption. Corruption which we've seen in the Irish Republic, the Trump issue, but before Trump, I mean, America's been the capital of corruption, and so on. It's to recognize that these forces are durable, they sustain themselves, there's great weakness and contradictions, but you know, we're talking about social systems that prevail for centuries, and we're dealing with these issues in our own countries for transformation, for social justice, at a time in which these imperialist forces, which Ireland and South Africa know very well from first-hand experience, that they are dominant and they serve the transnationals and they serve the wealthy and they attempt to split people and divide in order to dominate as they have the world. And they lost a lot in terms of the collapse of the colonial system. But post that colonial system, they're trying to reimpose that empire rule in different ways, which we recognize from the past. So we're facing that in South Africa, as you are in this island of Ireland.
You're a strong internationalist. How important is international solidarity?
It's vital. It's vital. You see, capital is internationalist, and nations and people are being dominated. From the Middle East, from Palestine to Africa and the Americas and Australia and Europe. And to fight on, we have to establish this commonality and international solidarity. So in our struggle, we always talked about the need for international solidarity to come hand in hand with our particular struggle. And I come from a country like Ireland itself, in which we hold very dear the need to stand in solidarity with people of similar struggles throughout the world.
You've visited Ireland many times. How important are the links between the national liberation struggle in Ireland and the struggle in South Africa?
Well, they're very, very important. They go deep. We're so aware of Irish history as you are of ours. Bobby Sands and Solomon Mahlangu, the murals that one has seen throughout Ireland. It shows how close, and there's a common way, a two-way process, not a one-way street, of common inspiration. So for sure, the Bobby Sands, the Solomon Mahlangus, they symbolize the closeness of this union, if we can call it that, and it is that, of sisterhood and brotherhood of our peoples, comradeship and standing by each other.
And finally, you'll be 80 years old in November.
80, good God, don't remind me.
What inspires you and what is your vision for the future?
Well, I'm continuously inspired by the sacrifice made of comrades in arms, of those who preceded me, of comrades throughout the world in struggle over centuries and in the current period. What inspires me is this young 15-year-old Tamimi woman who strikes an Israeli soldier in the face in anger. The people of Gaza who are prepared to march on the barrels of guns, and we've seen this in so many countries. The youth inspire me. The young women in South Africa who come to interview me, and I say the young woman because when I'm asked many times for interviews, I've come to realize that young black women, when they come to interview me, I learn so much from them, and I find them so inspiring. So it's not just a ritual about a woman's struggle, but women know and understand so much the whole nature of oppression and subservience. And I see this particularly in these brilliant, courageous, clear-minded young women, young black women in South Africa.
Ronnie, we really appreciate your time with us this evening. Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to have you in Ireland, a pleasure to have you here in Belfast. Amandla agus Berbua.
Away too. Thank you. It's my pleasure.
Sinn Féin, Goananus Carta agus Aontas na HÉireann, Equality, Rights and Irish Unity.